All right. Hi, everyone. I am Maquiba Massey with International Women of Blockchain and Web3 Women. Welcome to season 2 of Web3 Women. And today we have our special guest by the name of Chrissy Hill. And so, Chrissy, please just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. Well, Makiba, thank you so much for having me on. It is thrilling to be the first guest of season 2. I really appreciate y'all inviting me on. So, and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I do and how I ended up in this Web3 world, which probably about 3 years ago, I would have been like, really? Okay. It was on my radar, but
Okay.
not like it is today, obviously. So
Mhm.
I am the general counsel for Parity Technologies, which is the leading contributor to the Polkadot network.
Mhm.
And um, Polkadot has a bold vision of the world, and that is what drew me to working with the amazingly creative and pioneering people that I work with today, both within Parity. That's
Mhm.
where many of the engineers sit who have actually developed and built the Polkadot network. And
Mhm.
all of this was founded by Dr. Gavin Wood,
Mhm.
who was the co-founders of Ethereum, the first CTO of Ethereum, and actually is the person credited with coining the term Web3 and the current vision of Web3 in his 2014 blog post.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. I did not know that. That is
Yeah.
good to
I
know.
like, Makiba, I like to say I've worked for 4 great British names, even though, as you can tell from my accent, I am not British. Don't ask how a girl from Ravenel, South Carolina, which is right outside of Charleston, ended up in London for 20 years, but somehow I have. And I have
Wow.
so blessed and fortunate to have been able to work with, like I said, these 4 great British names, which are
Mhm.
Linklater, which is a global law firm, Barclays
Mhm.
Capital, which is a global investment bank, and
Okay.
then the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, and now Dr. Gavin Wood.
Yes. Awesome. So, how exactly did you start working with these 4 great individuals? And tell us what that journey was like. How did you get started?
Sure. So I knew I always wanted to be a lawyer. I come from
Okay.
a family of lawyers where you know, my dad, my brother, but I
Mhm.
always wanted to work outside the United States. And
Mhm.
I see that as like really educational, really important for your development. And I just wanted to see the world. So when I was
Okay.
25, I graduated from Georgetown and
Okay.
had a job offer with Linklaters. And I
Mhm.
thought I would go for 2 years to London.
Okay.
21 years later, I'm still there. And
Wow.
my, you know, life happens. Met a man, had 2 babies.
Okay.
My family always says, "Well, we raised you to be independent, but maybe not that independent."
I
So,
love
yeah,
it.
so I went and I did corporate law and then realized after about 4 years that that wasn't where I wanted to be long term. So in 2006, I left Linklaters to go work in compliance at an investment bank, Barclays Capital. And
Mhm.
then that was not a common move for lawyers to make from private practice to in-house within compliance. It was pre-financial crisis,
Okay.
especially in Europe. It was starting to happen in the US because
Mhm.
of Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron.
Mhm.
And I made the jump. And then, of course, you would never have wanted the financial crisis to happen, but
Mhm.
it did. And compliance became a much different kind of career path. And it was definitely the frontier of law and regulation. And then I did that for 7.5 years. And this job opportunity came up to be the head of legal and compliance for Mr. Blair's commercial
Mhm.
businesses at that time. Again, the frontier of law and compliance, because especially in the UK, um, he was doing things. it was the first time any former UK prime minister had gone into the charity space and consulting space as he did, a little bit like Bill Clinton did after he
Yeah.
left office.
Mhm.
That was my next frontier. And then I
Okay.
did that for almost a decade and thought,
Okay.
well, it's been working for 20 years. I'm coming to that point in my career. Where's the next frontier of law and regulation?
Okay.
And all I'll say is be careful what you wish for
Okay.
because I got it in a big way. And it's been great. It's been almost 2 years since I've been with Parity and in the Web3 space. And it is constantly changing and it's challenging, but I love that frontier mentality. And that's why it's been a great decision. And I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. That's good to know. So you keep mentioning Parity and Polkadot. So can you unpack those two organizations just a little bit more to share with us exactly what the organizations do and maybe how it could be beneficial to everyday people? Like, what should we know about Parity and Polkadot?
Sure. So the Polkadot relay chain, if you think about it like the subway system in New York, right?
Okay.
So we build blockchain infrastructure. Like that is what
Mhm.
Polkadot is. It's called
Okay.
block space.
Yeah.
And Parity, as the leading contributor, where the engineers sit who are building the tech, they're actually
Mhm.
the pioneers creating this. So
Yeah.
if we go back to that New York subway kind of idea,
Mhm.
you have the tunnels, the tracks, the trains, and you
Mhm.
have numerous stops off that subway system.
Right.
And could be Brooklyn, could be Fifth Avenue, could be Uptown, whatever it may be.
Right.
So Parity builds the equivalent infrastructure for
Mm.
trains. So it's like the
Okay.
tunnels, the tracks, and the trains.
Mm.
And the stops off that blockchain infrastructure could be crypto, could be gaming, could be
Gotcha.
NFTs, could
Okay.
be real world asset tokenization, could be
Mhm.
voting, could be healthcare records. So
Right.
we built that infrastructure much like the track, the trains, and the tunnels of the New York subway.
Mhm. Wow. I
So
did.
the use cases are only limited by our imagination, right?
Okay.
So blockchain can be used in all different types of scenarios where you want to record data, where you
Mm.
want to, I mean, real world asset tokenization is a great example. So in kind of our current system, you as a person, as an individual, could own a piece of property or an artwork or a mine or something like that. If you
Mhm.
were to tokenize that, you can lower the barriers to entry because you can cut up the pieces of that real world asset. And a lot of different people could then own that house or have ownership rights in that piece of art or piece of land, whatever it may be. So there are ways to, as I said, lower barriers to entry for some of these things that have been historically accessible only to those who had the money to purchase these things
Mhm.
in their lanes. So that is one potential use case.
Awesome. Wow. So you mentioned tokenization, right? What exactly is that? Can you unpack that a little bit in terms of what should people actually know to help them tokenize these different assets that would be available to them for purchasing?
So I would say get the right advisors behind you to help you do that.
Mhm.
Because it
Yep.
is very complicated depending upon what type of asset that you're talking about. Because, for
Mhm.
instance, it could be any real world asset.
Right.
And some of those real world assets will be seen to be of strategic importance to governments, for instance, because if
Mhm.
it's, I don't know, a uranium mine, for instance, that has
Mhm.
a that has a different risk profile to say somebody's house in Ravenel.
Right.
But
Mhm.
and it's a little bit like how our telephones work, right?
Mhm.
You don't really, as a user, you just want to pick up the phone and it works. You don't need
Right.
to know how all the
Yeah.
fiber optics work behind it. Uh,
Mhm.
what you need to do is have people who are experts who are working on those things to make
Mhm.
sure all the I's are dotted and T's crossed so you can just pick up your phone and use it. And it's a similar with like tokenization of real world assets. I think most people just want to be able to know that they own a piece of it. And so from their perspective, it would be purchasing that.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
behind it, having the engineers to make sure that
Mhm.
it's done properly from a tech perspective, lawyers to make sure it's done legally in the right
Yeah.
way.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where it is, but it's a digital representation of
Mhm.
real world
No.
assets, and
Gotcha.
that is we can go deeper into it,
Yeah.
but
I do have to ask because let's just say someone says, "Well, Chrissy, where do I go to actually find an advisor
yeah.
from whatever that I wanna buy?" Is there any particular place or website or whatever it may be for people to actually know people who can advise them that has credibility and is very knowledgeable in the space that you're in?
So because it's so new, because it is the frontier of law and
Mhm.
regulation, it's not like there's decades of precedent or jurisprudence
Mhm.
or law firms with
Right.
practice areas or
Mhm.
anything like that. So I think word of mouth, also LinkedIn,
Okay.
um, and there are certain um, law firms, and I don't want to call any out, by because um, there are many that are great, and
Gotcha.
it will also depend upon where you're at in the world. So I'm based
Okay.
in London, and I would recommend to someone based in London
Mm,
probably. I mean, we use Bird and Bird, for instance. They're our
mhm.
panel firm because they have a long-standing um, knowledge base and history in this area. We
Okay.
also use Linklaters.
Okay.
Again, I'm a proud Links alum, but we continue to use them. But even before I joined,
Gotcha.
they're a great law firm. And one thing I would say is be careful of anyone who says that they are an expert in
Mm.
any of these areas, right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it's changing every day. There are
Mm,
new laws coming in every day. And I think an honest advisor in these spaces would
right.
say, we are knowledgeable and we know where to look. Um, but it because it's changing all the time.
Mm,
Nobody is really an expert, in my opinion, particularly on a global basis, because there's what's happening in the U.S. versus what's happening in the U.K. and EU and Japan, and
mhm.
globally, people are taking different, um, perspectives and
Right.
tactics, and putting in place different laws. So I would just say be careful, ask around, get good
Okay.
recommendations, and be conscious of someone in one area is not
Right.
necessarily going to know better than the person who is in your area.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and that's really good to know. So curious to know if anybody wanted to get into this space, whether it's assisting or working in a company as Parity and Polkadot or wanting to help build infrastructures, right? Where would you direct them to go to learn more about whether it be your organizations or just how to get in the space? You mentioned there's low barriers to entry. And so, where exactly would you send someone to learn more about this space?
So I think the great thing is that this space is open to everybody,
Okay.
right? Um, and you don't necessarily need to be a computer scientist or have a
Mm,
programming background
okay.
to have access to this space. I think it,
Mhm.
it helps. Um, but again, that shouldn't be intimidating. I mean, I will date myself. I am a Gen Xer, and I'm taking programming lessons so I can learn how to code.
Right.
I have felt that that assists me in my job, and being able to kind of understand what the people I support do today on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. I will never be experts like them because they are just greatest pioneering creative minds, but it helps me speak the language a little bit more. But that's
Right.
accessible to me as a Gen Xer. So I think
Mhm.
regardless of your generation, regardless of where you live or where you're from, what you need is you need continuous access to electricity. You need
Okay.
reliable high-speed broadband. You need
Mm,
some funds to purchase the hardware like computers or laptops to participate. And you
okay.
need a um, community that supports your involvement. Now, I know some
Mm,
people will say around the world, not everybody has those things. And I would say that's correct and something that needs to be sorted out for people to be situated to be involved. But
okay.
um, that's something I think the world can be working on. But if you have an interest, there are universities, there's certifications, there's groups like this that y'all
Yeah.
are involved in, which support people. And, I think with a few well placed conversations and contacts, looking at LinkedIn and Twitter, you can get a good view of where you can learn more.
Okay. Perfect. And IWB certainly does have a certification course. And so hopefully we can put that up on the screen for you all to follow. But Chrissy, there is a question in the chat. Someone asked, can you give us an outline on the procedures of tokenization?
Oh, wow. Um, I think that would take a little bit of time. Again, we need to know. I mean, if you want to, for instance, tokenize real estate, uh,
Hmm.
you would need to go through a process where you searched up the title for that real estate in a traditional way.
Hmm.
And you would need to understand the current state of ownership for that asset before then you could look into digitally representing that asset. Some people might do that through NFTs.
Hmm.
For instance, actually, I was just speaking to give another example of a real world asset, I was just speaking to a lady who is a female founder, always want to support female founders. And
Absolutely.
she is working with some fashion houses with their handbags in order to tokenize those handbags. And then when the handbags are serviced, there's a
Mhm.
record of that. So if you ever wanted to pass those handbags or whatever it may be onto um, your children, or if you wanted to sell them, there's a record of how you've kept up with it. It's the same thing with cars. And because this is all on chain, um, it can't be tampered with, right? It's immutable
Yeah.
and it will always be accessible. So there's a digital fingerprint or footprint, however you want to talk about it, where you can follow the history of, again, whether it's a handbag, whether it's a piece of property, whether
Mm,
it's a car.
okay.
It is seen to be more reliable
Hmm.
than, say, a traditional paper record, for
Right.
instance.
Gotcha. Okay. That certainly makes sense. And so we are now moving into our lightning round. And we'll ask quick questions if you can just give answers that's just off the top of your head,
Mhm.
and can wrap things up in case anyone doesn't have any other questions. And so the first question I have for you is, what book is out there that you read to learn more about this space and Web3 and blockchain?
So I would say when I started, and this was again end of 2021, beginning of 2022, there wasn't a lot of information out then. There's been an
Mm,
explosion of information in the meantime. And so I did a lot of online research, basically looking at the Polkadot wiki. That was where I went. So Polkadot has its own wiki. And of course, that's protocol specific, but that gave me the knowledge I needed in order to look at other protocols. And it goes through all the basics of Web3 and blockchain and
Mhm.
staking, all the different concepts you hear about. So there are a number of videos, and that wiki were really helpful for me.
Perfect. And if there was like one technological tool in the blockchain space that people could learn, right? Not be an expert in, but people could just like learn the foundation and basics of it. What would you suggest that people learn first? Would it be NFTs, the metaverse, crypto, smart contracts?
I think smart contracts is a great place to start because that is really one of the fundamental building blocks. But I must also give a plug to one of my fabulous colleagues. His name's Gautam Dameja, and he does something called block shots. And
Ooh,
they are 5 minutes little podcast on all the different components
ooh,
of Web3, blockchain, a lot of these emerging technologies. And for
okay.
me, those 5 minute block shots have
Yep.
been amazing. And so if there is anything that you want to learn about, he's adding to it still, but
Right.
I think that is a fantastic place to go to find out information on how smart contracts work. What is staking?
Awesome.
What is
Okay.
EVM? What is
Mhm.
WASM? How do they all work? So I highly recommend that. Block Shots by Gautam Dameja.
Block shots. Got it. We did have one more question from the audience. I'm just going to ask that really quickly. Sebastian, since you work higher in this space, much more so than many who are flipping tokens for profit, I'm curious, how much diversity are you seeing? Does representation persist?
So that is a great question. I think every industry, including this industry, can work on promoting diversity of thought in all its forms. I certainly, I mean, I was the first female member of the C-suite at Parity Technologies. And so, that is something I take very seriously. I'm a first generation female leader in this space. Again,
Oh,
something that I didn't necessarily
thank
realize I would be,
you.
but I take as something that is, very important to my identity within this space. And I
Mhm.
think, again, it's not just being a female, it's diversity of thought in all its forms. Also, that's absolutely essential to get to the truth. One of our mottos is more truthful, less trustful. And the
Mm,
more points of view you have represented, the closer you will get to the truth.
yeah,
So I think we need to work on that. We need to promote it in all its forms. And I think I'd like to see more of that in
yes,
every aspect of about
absolutely.
every industry.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And where could people find you if they just want to continue to follow your journey, learn more from you, or maybe send a message and build a connection with you? Where could people find you?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is USC Hill
Okay.
because I'm a proud alumni of the University of South Carolina. So, which also my initials at work are Chill, which I always think it's good for a lawyer, right? It kind of brings down the temperature a little bit when we're talking. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. Those are the two platforms that I am most active on. And that is where you can find me. And I would love to hear from anyone and learn from you and see how I can maybe contribute as well to your journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. And we look forward to having you back.
Oh, Makita, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye bye.